Alright, so the first few problems are slope. This is back what we did in the beginning of Module 6. So to find the slope given a line, you just need to count. So you have 2 points here, and you need to calculate the rise over run. So we're going down. Now how many units are we going down? It looks like 5. So because we're going down, it's going to be -5 over our run, which means we're going to the right 2 times. So your slope will be -5 over 2. So remember, your slope, or the variable that we commonly use for slope, is m. That's going to be equal to rise over run, or change in y over change in x. Remember, anytime you have a line that's going down from left to right, you're going to have a negative slope. Alright, here we have a horizontal line. So remember, with horizontal lines, your slope is always going to be 0. So that's easy. This is going to be m equals 0. And here we have a vertical line. Remember, with vertical lines, your slope is always going to be undefined. Next, how do we find slope if we're given 2 points? Well, then we use our slope formula. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if we label our points, this is x1, y1, x2, y2. We would get -4 minus -1 over -3 minus -12. -4 minus -1 would be -4 plus 1, which is -3. -3 minus -12 would be -3 plus 12, which would be 9, which would mean that your slope is -1 over 3. Alright, same thing. Remember your slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So there's your x1, y1, x2, y2. And it's y2, -2, minus y1, which is 7, over x2, which is -11, minus x1, which is -11. -2 minus 7 is -9. -11 minus -11 would mean -11 plus 11, which would be 0. And when we have 0 in the denominator, that means our slope is going to be undefined. That means we're going to have a vertical line, which vertical lines are undefined. Write a linear equation with a slope of 1 and a y-intercept of -7. Well, we have a slope and a y-intercept, so the easiest way to write an equation for this is just to use your slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, where m in this case is going to be 1, and b in this case is going to be -7. So this would just be y equals 1x minus 7, or y equals x minus 7. That's all you would have to do. Identify the slope and the y-intercept of the equation y equals -3x. Well, remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Well, what number is in the m position, which would be your slope, and that's -3. What number is in the b position? Well, it doesn't look like there's a number in the b position, so that means we could just add a plus 0 here if that helps you out. So what number is actually in the b position? That would be 0. Your y-intercept would be 0. Identify the slope and the y-intercept of the equation 2x plus 5y equals 20. So this equation is in standard form. Remember, when an equation is in standard form and you're trying to find the slope and the y-intercept, just solve it for y, change the equation to slope-intercept form, and then you'd be able to easily identify your slope and your y-intercept. So in order to solve this equation for y, we're first going to need to get rid of the 2x. How do we do that? By subtracting a 2x on both sides. And if we do that, we get 5y equals -2x plus 20. Then we would need to divide by 5 on both sides, and we would get, I'm running out of space here, I'll write it over here, y equals -2/5 plus 4. So what number's in the m position? Your slope, that's going to be negative 2/5. What number's in the b position, which would be your y-intercept? That number is going to be 4. Identify the slope and the y-intercept of this equation. So again, you're going to need to solve this for y. And that would easily give you your slope and your y-intercept. So to solve this for y, we're first going to want to get rid of this x. So we subtract x on both sides. And if you do that, you get negative 2y equals negative x plus 2. Then you would divide both sides by negative 2. And you would get y equals, here we have a negative and a negative, which would make this a positive 1/2. And then 2 divided by negative 2 is minus 1. So what is your slope? Your slope in this case is going to be 1/2. And what is your y-intercept? It's going to be negative 1. Identify the equation of the line graphed below. Prove by converting. So what I would do is I would just write this equation in slope-intercept form first, and then all your answer choices are in standard form, right? So you'd want to change it to standard form later. But first, let's write it in slope-intercept form. So it looks like my y-intercept is right here. So what is that y-intercept? 4. That means my b is going to be equal to 4. What's my slope? Well, for slope, we need 2 points. We have 1 point in our y-intercept. We have another point here. So it looks like we go down 1 to the right 2. That means our slope, and I'll do this in blue, our slope is going to be negative 1/2. So in slope-intercept form, that would be y equals our slope, which is negative 1/2 x plus our y-intercept, which is 4. Now, if you notice, all your answer choices are in standard form. So you don't want them in standard form. So what would you do? You would need to change either this equation to standard form, or you would need to change these equations to slope-intercept form and see which one matches with your original equation. So to change this equation to standard form, we'd first need to add 1/2 x. So if we add 1/2 x, we'd get 1/2 x plus y equals 4. All right, that still doesn't match with any of the equations that are on your answer choices. That's because your equations don't have fractions. You want to get rid of that 1/2 x. You want to get rid of that fraction. In order to do that, you'd have to multiply everything by the denominator, which is 2. And that would change it to 2 over 2x, which is just x, plus 2y, and then 4 times 2 is 8. So your answer is C. If that's confusing, you could also just change all of these equations to slope-intercept form and see which one matches your answer choice. All right, here we have a y-intercept of negative 1, and we have a slope of, looks like we rise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we run 1, 2, 3. So we have a slope of 5 over 3, and it's positive. So your equation in slope-intercept form is y equals 5/3 x minus 1. Now, if what I did above was confusing, then you could also just take all these equations and solve them and put them in slope-intercept form and see which one matches the equation that you just came up with. So to do that for a, I would subtract 3x, right? So that would be 5y equals negative 3x plus 5. And then I divide everything by 5, which would give me y equals negative 3/5 x plus 1. So that obviously doesn't match. And I probably know that this one isn't going to work because this one also has a 3 on the x. But if we look over here, our numerator is 5, so we probably want a 5 attached to the x. So let's try D. Let's see if D works. So with D, we would have to subtract 5x first. And that would give you negative 3y equals negative 5x plus 3. Then we divide everything by negative 3, and if you divide everything by negative 3, we have two negatives there. That's negative 5 divided by negative 3, so that's going to give you y equals 5 thirds x, and then 3 divided by negative 3 is minus 1, which matches, so D is your choice. So our parent linear function is f of x equals x, which is this middle function here. I'm going to go ahead and shade it in red here. Okay, and we're looking for functions that represents the indicated parameter changes. So 13, we're saying that the slope is increasing, but the y-intercept is unchanged. So if you remember from your notes and from your lesson, that means that this is going to be a steeper graph, but it's still going to have the same y-intercept. So we're looking for a graph that still crosses the y-axis right here at 0, but is steeper. So we only have two lines that still cross the y-axis, which is g of x and m of x, but only one of them is steeper. The steeper one would be g of x. So the answer to number 13 would be g of x. Number 14, this time our slope is decreased, but our y-intercept is still the same. All right, so slope is decreased, but the y-intercept is still the same. So it's still crossing 0, 0, which means that it's only going to be one of two lines. But this time our slope is smaller, which means it's going to be less steep. It's not as steep, so that would be m of x. Now, we have our m, which is unchanged, but our y-intercept has increased. So that means our line is going to have the same steepness as our parent function. It's just going to have a y-intercept that's increased, which if your y-intercept is increased, that means that it's going to be shifting upwards. Okay, so that's, well, you only have two possible answers, h of x or n of x. N of x looks like it's shifted downward, so your answer is obviously going to be h of x. And then slope unchanged, but y-intercept decreased, that would be n of x. All right, describe the transformations on the graph of the parent function that results in the graph of g of x. So, a few things that I noticed. First of all, remember this is your parent function, so it looks like we have a negative in front of it, so it's going to be a reflection, or it's going to flip. It's we now have a fraction 3/4, so it's not going to be as steep. You could put less steep. And we have plus 5, which means we're going to shift up 5. All right, next we have g of x equals 7x minus 8. So we have a 7 in front of the x, which that means an increased slope, so it'll be steeper. Then we have a minus 8, so that means it'll go down, shift down 8 spaces. All right, so remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So here we have a music app charges $2 to download the app plus $1.29 per song, $1.29 per song downloaded. Before we read the rest of the question, let's see if we can come up with an equation in slope-intercept form. And it is going to be in slope-intercept form because not only does it say slope-intercept form here, but we're dealing with a rate. We have that per word. So because we have that per word, we know our slope is going to be 1.29. Now, what's our b? What's our starting point? What's our constant? It looks like they charge a flat fee of $2. Okay? So your b is going to be 2. So if we write this in slope-intercept form, it's going to be y equals 1.29x plus 2. Now it says write and solve a linear equation to find the total cost of downloading 30 songs. Well, first, what does x represent? X represents the songs. Okay, so where are we going to be plugging in 30? We're going to be plugging in 30 for x. So that would be y equals 1.29 times 30 plus 2. Which if you solve that, you'd get $40.70. 40.7 would be the cost. Next, Carly has already written 35 pages of a novel. She's already written 35 pages. She plans to write 12 additional pages per month. Before we go any further, let's write our linear equation, the slope-intercept form. So remember, it's y equals mx plus b. What's your M? What's our rate? It says 12 additional pages per month, so it's going to be 12. And what's our constant? She's already written 35 pages. That's our starting point. That's our constant. All right, so that's going to be y equals 12x plus 35. What does x represent? X represents the months, the amount of months that go by. Okay, now let's read the rest of the problem. It says, write and solve a linear equation to find the total number of pages written at 5 months. So it's 5 months, so we're going to be plugging 5 into x. So that's going to be y equals 12 times 5 plus 35. Well, 12 times 5 is 60, so it's 60 plus 35. And 60 plus 35 is 95. So 95 total pages. Standard form, remember, is ax plus by equals c. So with standard form, it usually means we're going to be talking about two different things. So if we read number 21, it says the admission fee of a small fair is $1.50 for children and $4 for adults. So those are our two different things that we're talking about in this problem. So x is going to represent children, and y is going to represent adults. All right. On a certain day, $5,050 is collected. Let's stop right there. So first, let's write this equation in standard form. So it's ax plus by equals c. What number is going to go in for a? Well, how much does it cost per children? For children, it's $1.50 for children, so that'd be 150 x, because x represents children. Plus, how much does it cost for adults? $4 for adults, so it'd be 4. Why? Because y represents adults. And that equals, well, they've collected $5,050. Now, we don't know how much they charge for children. We don't know how much they charge. I'm sorry. We do know how much they charge for children. We don't know how many children came. We don't know how many adults came. But we do know that children are charged $1.50. We do know that adults are charged $4. And we do know that we made a total of $5,050. Now, let's read the rest of the problem. It says, if 1,000 adults attended, write and solve a linear equation to find the number of children that attended. So adults, would that be x or y? It should be y. We're going to be plugging in 1,000 for y. So this is going to be 1.50x plus 4 times 1,000 equals 5,050. Well, 4 times 1,000 would be 4,000. Then you'd subtract by 4,000 on both sides, and I'm going to move this up here. So if we subtract by 4,000 on both sides, we get 1.50x equals 4,050. And your last step would be to divide both sides by 1.50. Which, if you do that, you should get 2,700 children attended. Last, number 22. A landscaping company ordered 17 plants and 8 trees. So two things. We're talking about plants and trees for a total cost of $964. Let's stop right there. So X is going to represent plants. Y is going to represent trees. Remember, it's AX plus BY equals C. So what number would go in the A position? Well, they ordered 17 plants. So it'd be 17X. What number would go in the B position? They ordered 8 trees. So it'd be 8Y. We don't know how much it costs, but we know that the total was $964. Now, if plants are $12 each, write and solve a linear equation to find the cost of each tree. So plants. So where are we going to plug the 12 in? Are we going to plug it for X or for Y? Hopefully you said for X. So it'd be 17 times 12 plus 8Y equals 964. So 17 times 12 is 204. And then you subtract both sides by 204. And you get 8y equals negative 700 and, I'm sorry, not negative 760, 760. You divide by 8 on both sides, and if you do that, you should find out that the trees cost $95. That's it. That's your study guide. So hopefully you're prepared for tomorrow's test. Look over your notes a little bit more, and I will see you tomorrow.